open council very shortly. Thank you. Anyone that wishes to leave, they can do so during that interlude. That's right. Sitting down now, are we? Welcome to tonight's ordinary council meeting for Monday the 11th of March 2019. If everyone could stand for the opening prayer and acknowledgement, please. Lord, we ask that you guide us in our decision making, protect us in the community we serve from all that is evil, and strengthen our unity for the welfare of the city. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land that we meet upon today, and pay my respects to the elders, both past, present and future, for they hold the memories, the culture, tradition and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that contribute to our community. Thank you. Just wish to inform you this council meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this council meeting that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this council meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declarations received by the Chair and disclosure of political donations. I have one conflict of interest declaration from Mr. Zachnich, Frank Zachnich, pecuniary. It's the GM performance review. It's item 17.1, midterm performance review. It's a confidential item and the action is leave the chamber when item is being considered. Mr. Zachnich.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This advice relates to disclosure of political donations and requirements of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. The Act under Section 147 requires a person submitting planning applications or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donation and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of council. Reportable political donations include those of or above $1,000. The disclosure statement forms are available on Council's website or from the Customer Service Centre and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. The forms are also available at the back of the chamber during meetings. In dealing with development applications, councillors need to take into account specific matters contained in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. Accordingly, the provisions of Section 79C1 of that Act are set out in the Council Officer's report detailing issues to be considered. The Local Government Act 1993, Section 375A requires that a division be called whenever a motion for a planning decision is put at a meeting of the Council. Planning decision means a decision made in the exercise of a function of Council under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979, including a decision relating to a development application, an environmental planning instrument, a development control plan or a development contribution plan under that Act, but not including the making of an order under Division 2A of Part 6 of that Act. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Zachnich. CM4, which is the apologies. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the Council receive, note and accept the apology of Councillor King and grant leave of absence for the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. CM5, there is no mayoral minute. CM6, the action plan, 6.1 to 6.4. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To move that they be received and noted, that the following action plans be received and noted: actions complete for noting only, actions awaiting response from external parties, actions in progress and long-term issues more than 3 months, noting that not all are populated.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you.
There are no questions or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. CM7, the confirmation minutes of the previous meeting held on Monday the 25th of February 2019. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that the minutes of the council meeting held on Monday 25th February 2019 at 6 p.m. be confirmed.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, do you wish to speak to that at all?
No, thank you.
There being no question or debate, happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. The reports from Community Forum, CM8, there aren't any. CM9, notices of motion. Thank you, Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that AlburyCity A supports the Murray-Darling Association in its objective to ensure local government has a role in informing the decisions that impact our local communities under the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, and in their bid to secure recurrent funding for the provision of effective consultation and engagement with councils within the Murray-Darling Basin communities through their local representatives. B, write a letter of support to the Murray-Darling Association for the state and federal governments to contribute to the ongoing funding of the MDA. C, write to our local state and federal MPs, encourage them to support state and federal governments contributing to the ongoing funding of the MDA. And D, write to all councils in our region, encouraging them to join the MDA and support the activation and development of advocacy priorities for this region.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, just open debate on that item.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Most people would know that the Murray-Darling Association is an association of local governments funded only by membership from local councils in the basin, of which there are about 150. The association has existed since 1944 and at the moment operates with one member of staff and on a shoestring budget. It's our view that many of the problems with the Murray-Darling Basin Plan are because local government was not consulted and is still not being regularly consulted. This has led to a number of failings and problems with the plan. We recently, for example, when the fish kills occurred at Menindee, coordinated a meeting of Western New South Wales mayors and went to Sydney to meet the MDBA, Department of Ag and Water, New South Wales Water and a number of other people. If the MDA were a consultant, they would probably have charged $50,000 to organise that event and to deal with it. We got nothing. And yet the government's got the benefit of local governments and mayors providing them direct feedback about the issues that had caused this particular problem. But it's not the only problem. Everyone knows, you read it every day, the plan has significant issues. I'm not saying the plan has failed, I'm saying the plan has issues, and the MDA is well placed to provide advice to governments, but it's not well funded. And this is simply asking relevant authorities, governments, to provide recurrent funding. We're asking for $5 million over 4 years, which will enable us to engage more staff and to more adequately represent the councils that exist within the Murray-Darling Basin. At the moment, we are struggling with the size of New South Wales, for example, to represent the councils in central New South Wales. And these are the areas where the major problems in this plan are occurring, central and northern New South Wales and Queensland. And we want councils to join, but we also want the governments to contribute to an organisation that provides them with significant feedback and significant input to the issues relating to the plan. So I commend this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I have a speaker for, but I have a question first. Shall we take the question, Councillor Gladden? Councillor Vanderman, question?
Thank you, through you to Councillor Thurley. Is it not too late for any of this action? Is this something that should have been done 5 years ago, or do you still see a role for... I'd like to encourage other councils to join, but they've had plenty of opportunity to join, and we're also asking for federal and state funding to actually get them to change their policy which they've funded as well. So I'm not sure whether we're going to achieve a hell of a lot by doing it. Happy to support the motion, but I'm just wondering whether it's not too late. It should have been done 5 years ago.
Councillor Thurley.
Well, it's never too late. The plan, for example, the Water Act was 2007 and the plan has really only just begun. The first moves on the plan were 2012. The plan itself is not to be implemented in full until 2024. We, at the moment, have not, we've only registered, I think, maybe in New South Wales, 6 out of 33 water sharing plans, so it's nowhere near too late. The advice from local councils and local people is critical right now, and it's, in my opinion, nowhere near too late. It's time to do it now.
Thank you. Councillor Gleichen, you wish to speak for the motion?
Yes, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity, Mr Mayor. I support this because, as Councillor Thurley has pointed out, there are many councils and shires that form part of the Murray-Darling Basin community. And those councils and shires have either a direct or indirect relationship with the waterways and the water areas within the Murray-Darling Basin. It's important that each of those councils and shires has an opportunity to speak on behalf of their communities, because the whole focus has been from an upper level and not from the lower level of the communities of interest along and within those basins, and how we use, how we have what our relationship is with those basins. So it is imperative that we ensure that we allow our communities to have a voice, and so we need to encourage all of those communities. I do understand the concerns of Councillor Van der Ven that it has been some time since this whole program was commenced, but essentially there is time for the voices of our communities to be heard, for the voices of our communities to have a say. And so I think this is a good opportunity to take that forward so that we have the meeting in the middle of the communities as well as the government organisations who have a role and a responsibility with this. So I do support this motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gleichen. Councillor Thurley, just a question from the Chair, if you wouldn't mind. You may have mentioned it. What are the total number of members now, and what is the current operating budget for the MDA?
I'm not exactly sure of the total membership. It's somewhere just over 70, I believe, so less than half. And the operating budget is $230,000 a year.
And that's only one FT at the moment, isn't it?
Correct.
Thank you. There being no further speakers for or against, I might sort of speak just briefly on this particular motion. The MDA have been in existence since 1944. The representation of the Murray-Darling Basin is critical to ensuring that there is an accountability for our community to have a say, and having been involved with the renaissance of the MDA 7 years ago and the subsequent chairship of Councillor Thurley, who has done a wonderful job, I would suggest that things haven't gone as best as they possibly could in funding this particular organisation. There's a level of professionalism that's expected, and if we're to have any say in what's happening with the water situation and the plan, I think it's something we should support, and certainly as a regional city on the Murray River, we should provide that support. Councillor Thurley, just to close debate.
Just briefly, and you've touched on the most important issue, what we're asking from this council and other councils is a letter of support. Nothing more, no money involved, except your ongoing membership. If I could just summarise one little thing. If the carp control strategy were introduced tomorrow, the main people involved would be local government, and we need to have our voice in there so that we're considered before decisions are made. Introducing a carp control program could be a disaster, and our voice needs to be heard, and this is one way to be heard, through the MDA. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. CM10, there are no presentations or deputations. CM11, the reports of minutes of committees and working parties. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Glacken.
No.
Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council receive, note and accept the minutes and recommendations of the Murray-Darling Association Region 1 meeting held on Friday 22nd February 2019.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, sorry about that.
Thank you. Happy to second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, to speak to that.
Very briefly, just to say these are the sorts of things that the MDA does. Earlier this year, we had New South Wales Water issued a red alert for algae in Lake Hume. They tested once, they issued the alert, they scared everyone out of the water. They didn't test again for a week or two. It was clearly poorly done. Now we have an algae alert in Manus Lake near Tumbarumba, and the MDA has written to the Minister requesting urgent action on the issue of blue-green algae in waterways and lakes and an appropriate response from New South Wales Government and New South Wales Water. So MDA does do things and can achieve things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. There are no further speakers for or against. Happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? Motion is carried. 11.2, the minutes of the Sustainability Advisory Committee held on the Tuesday the 12th of February. Councillor Conn.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Happy to move that Council receive, note and accept the minutes and recommendations of the Sustainability Advisory Committee meeting held on Tuesday the 12th of February 2019.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Conn, do you wish to speak to that?
Only briefly, Mr Mayor, noting that Councillor Thurley is actually the chair of that committee. We've recently welcomed a number of new members to that committee who have brought great enthusiasm and great knowledge, and we look forward to continue to work with them.
Thank you. There being no further speakers for or against, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Documents for sealing, CM12. Thank you, councillors. CM12.1. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council authorises its seal to be affixed to the documents outlined below in the presence of two signatories authorised to affix the seal pursuant to Regulation 400 of the Local Government General Regulation 2005 and the Council seal and management of legal documents and advice procedure. A, AlburyCity lease to Albury Wodonga Table Tennis Association Incorporated of 471 North Street, Albury, commenced 1st January 2019 for 5 years with a 5-year option. That's FIL 09/01763. And B, AlburyCity lease to Albury North Manual Activity Centre Incorporated of Manual Activity Centre at 416 Noland Avenue, Lavington, commenced 1st November 2018 for 5 years. FIL 09/01794.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Thurley, do you speak to that at all?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. CM13, Officers' Reports for consideration. 13.1 is the Draft Honour Recognition Award Policy and Procedure. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council A endorse the Draft Honour Recognition and Awards Policy and Procedure for public exhibition for a period of 28 days, and in the event of no submissions are received, the Draft Honour Recognition and Awards Policy be adopted.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Very happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, just open debate on that item.
Just briefly, we did have a situation here a few months ago, or quite a while ago now, but relating to recognition of a person in this community and naming some parts of a stadium park after that person. And it was quite clear at the time that we didn't have clear-cut and good guidelines. It was a bit ad hoc, and this is a great policy, so the public will understand how and why we recognise people and will have no doubt about what can be done and what can't be done. So I think it's a great policy, and I look forward to receiving any submissions from the public.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I have a speaker for Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I congratulate staff on bringing this document forward. It will clear up quite a few opportunities throughout the last couple of years where there's been some inconsistency with some of the policies and procedures. For example, freedom of entry will be one thing we're going to now tighten up, and I thoroughly recommend this to my fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. No further speakers for or against. Councillor Thurley, you wish to close debate?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. 13.2, the Aquatics Usage and Accessibility Report. Councillor Conn.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative motion that Council A notes the new family concession membership to be introduced from 2019-20, and B does not identify a preferred model until Model 4, the monthly licence usage model, is presented to user groups and casual pool users as per Aligned Leisure's community engagement strategy, and that this process commence no later than April 2019.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Conn, did you wish to open debate?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, to acknowledge the people in the gallery and those that have addressed us tonight, and thank you for your participation. I'll start off by saying that my personal view, having swum at our swim centres twice a week all summer to train for a triathlon, and also as a swiftwater rescue technician with the SES who attended one of the river rescues this summer, that I believe that the monthly licence usage model is the best option, that balances the needs of the clubs with the casual pool users, who do expect that clubs be charged for exclusive use of a public facility. If I want to kick a football at Greenfield Park during a match, I can't do that because that football club's paid a licence fee, and I strongly believe that that's the expectation of our community. In addition, I think the monthly licence usage model acknowledges that swim clubs and water polo clubs are the primary users of our pools in shoulder seasons and off-season, and would heavily discount that usage, which I think is really appropriate. But there's certainly an expectation that clubs are charged for exclusive use of our facilities when they're in high demand over the summer. That being said, Albury Council supported a cross-border aquatics advisory committee recently, which was never formed because Wodonga Council chose not to take part in that, and as a result we haven't been able to consult our community adequately on these options. And I don't think it's fair that we commit to a preferred model tonight, not having taken that model out to the community to actually hear what they think about it. So my personal opinion is to support Model 4, but I think we should take that out to community consultation so that user groups have the option to provide formal submissions on that option, in addition to the casual pool users. Thanks.
Thank you. I have a question from Councillor Glacken. Councillor Glacken?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to the most relevant member of staff. One of the speakers said that the pool licence fee, which was option 4, is unlike other user charges for users at other council facilities. On page 43, it says the fourth bullet point down for comments about the licence model. It says it's consistent with other sporting fee structures for council facilities. This is in contradiction to the comment made by one of our speakers earlier tonight. Can the relevant member of staff explain how does licence fee make it consistent, or how would it make it consistent with other sporting structures for council facilities? And I do have another one as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms Code.
Thank you for the question through you, Mr Mayor. We have a variety of licences and leases through which we apply to our sporting clubs. They will have slightly different arrangements depending on the type of club it is and the type of organisation it is, but what is consistent is that users pay or partially contribute to the use of these grounds or the use of these facilities. The nuances of what they contribute is within the licence agreement, which the club will then discuss with council, or in this case which Aligned Leisure would then discuss with the action group. But we do charge and we do have consistent application of some sort of user contribution for exclusive use.
Follow up?
Thank you. It's a separate question, if I may, Mr Mayor. Earlier I asked, during the time of the speakers, I asked what the costs were for, or the likely costs of options 2, 3 and 4, because they're not in the report. And I know the General Manager confirmed that they had been made available in previous workshops. Can I ask, please, can I be reminded what are the indicative or the likely costs or related costs for options 2, 3 and 4? What would they look like? And noting in particular option 4, which was the licence model.
Ms Code.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. Option 2 is the option that was presented and rejected. So that's the option where it was water polo had $5 and the swimming clubs had $10 per lane per hour. Now, that is the starting point for the discussion. Really, if option 4 is chosen, which is the licence model, Aligned Leisure will need to meet with the action group and discuss those nuances and come to an arrangement. It's not for council or it's not for us to set those fees. Additionally, sponsorship and other opportunities are still available for the swimming associations and water polo clubs, and Aligned Leisure, as I understand, would like to work with them to enable that, including takings when they have meet days. So the nuances of what this will look like, they need to sit down and discuss. But we do know where they were, which is the $5 and the $10, which was rejected. We do know that started off at $25.80, which Aligned Leisure, once they knew that this was not applied consistently, then said, right, let's go back to the drawing board and talk, and they came up with that first proposal. It comes down to the discussion between Aligned Leisure and the action group.
Thank you. Did you have your button pressed to speak for?
Yes.
Okay. No, there are no other speakers. You're happy to speak for.
Thank you. I think this is a good alternative option or motion for this evening because it notes the progress that has been made, and that is the family concession membership to be introduced in 2020. It acknowledges that there will be no lane hire fee or licences for the balance of this year, the small portion of the year that remains. But it also enables further engagement and consultation with the community, which will also, I trust, be engagement with the wider community, not just the main users of the pool, not just the clubs and groups within the pool. I can only hope that the new aquatics managers consult with the balance of the community as well, which they'll have to work very hard to do because not a lot of pool users are there except the people who are there most of the year. I do acknowledge also that in the report, and has been alluded to by a fellow councillor this evening, that the licence model, the preferred model of the staff, current preferred model of the staff, which is the one that we're asking them, the facility management, to talk to the community about. It acknowledges, as has been stated here this evening, that there are a number of pool users, and they're mainly the clubs and organised groups who use the pool for a significantly longer period, so those shoulder periods. So I think this acknowledges that, but it also paves the way forward for what we're being told by other people in our community, that they don't like to see the lanes being booked out when they want to go and use the pool. So this, I think, is a good opportunity to reach some compromise, and so I will be supporting this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gluckin. A speaker against, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I had intended to support this, initially to support this amended motion, or this motion, but on hearing Ms Code's reply to the question she was asked by Councillor Gluckin, I'm more comfortable with option 1 in the report. Now, this is a big subject, and it's been the subject of a lot of discussion and a lot of study and inquiry and education for my part. But we are saddled with a situation, all of us, that is not of our making, in that this situation was allowed to develop over many decades in Albury. And for many decades, the swimming sports were permitted and are permitted to use the facilities for the cost of the entrance fee, the same as casual or recreational users. Whether that's right or wrong is a subject that can be debated and discussed at length, and there's cogent arguments for and against that. It's very difficult, as I alluded to earlier, when I was speaking to Ms Cole, or asking a question of Ms Cole, to justify to someone who is not a water polo player or a member of a swimming club why they pay the same admission but the facility is reserved, at least in part, for the exclusive use at certain times of the clubs. However, there are arguments for that too, I acknowledge that. What is the way forward? I would hope that the way forward is some sort of licence fee arrangement. Whether that should be coupled with a paying of an admission fee, I'm not convinced. I think it should be either or personally. But however, it doesn't matter so much what I personally think, because I'm not the expert and I'm not the person that has to negotiate this situation. But there are some things around this that I believe very strongly that are precluding me now from supporting this motion before us, and it's this. This was an error on the part of the council. This was an error, I believe personally, in the construction of the tender and the tender process. That's my view, and I think it's a justifiable view, and I think it's an informed view. I have seen no contrition from senior staff about the tender process. I have yet to see any reassuring or concrete signs that any steps have been taken to make sure that this debacle cannot occur again. In the 2 terms this time, not excluding my previous term 20 years ago, that I've been on council, this has been the worst and the lowest point, I've got to say. And I've been very disappointed. I've generally been very proud of the achievements of this council, but this particular issue has been mishandled at each step. A further complicating factor is the behaviour of Wodonga City Council, who have cloistered themselves up like a papal conclave and refuse to emerge and talk from their ivory tower with their own ratepayers. If they want us to participate in a partnership with them, and I hope they do because it's the only way forward that I can see for a regional aquatic indoor facility, then they need to start behaving in a more constructive manner. I cannot see how a democratically elected organisation can continue when it doesn't talk to its ratepayers about these very controversial issues. And I am concerned, deeply concerned, that if they don't start engaging along with us in a real proper consultation with the community and the swimming user groups, that we're going to have major problems moving any of this forward. Having said that, I think that there has not been proper consultation still with the user groups. I do not, and I utterly reject the proposition that it's all Align's problem. Go and talk to Aligned. This is council's facility. We are now in a situation that's a result of what I believe was a flawed process. The moral and the practical responsibility falls on this council to fix the problem and to engage with the community and negotiate with the community and stop trying to be hands-off and solve the problem by deferring it and deflecting it to Aligned Leisure. Now, if this motion doesn't get up, I would be moving option 1, and I am unafraid of variation. It's not ideal, of course it's not. It comes with great fiscal cost, but what else could occur, and some would say it would be just that occur, because of the way in which I believe, personally, this is my view, no others, that this contract was let and mismanaged and misidentified. Not our greatest hour, I have to say. Generally, I've been very proud of the work of this council, as I said earlier, but this contract leaves me very disillusioned, and this whole process. I can't support the motion because it's predicated on Aligned Leisure doing the consultation and the engagement. If the mover and seconder of the motion could see fit to modify that slightly, I would be happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Vander, I have a question, Councillor Doxey, speak before you have me take the question. Councillor Vander, question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really confused about the comments that are put against Model 1, which is the no lane hire fee to be paid by user groups. And it says this model could result in council paying a variation to the contract with Aligned Leisure to recoup the shortfall of the foregone lane hire fees. Seeing that there was no record of any lane hire fees being paid previously, how can there be a shortage, the shortfall on the foregone lane hire fees?
Ms Cade.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The shortfall would be what would have been in the tender response and in the documentation which showed the modelling behind what Aligned Leisure was expecting to accept as an income from the lane hire and other usage.
But there was no follow-up, Mr Mayor, please.
Councillor
Through you.
Vanderman.
But there was no lane hire fees identified as income in the period prior to the contract being let.
Is that a question or a
Yeah,
statement?
I'm asking.
Was there?
Was there was no, in my view, was there any lane hire fees charged in the period immediately before the contract was let?
Thank you. Ms Code.
Mr Mayor, thank you for the question. My understanding is that there were lane hire fees applied for commercial ventures, such as football clubs coming in using the lanes. Wodonga had a slightly different application of the lane hire fees, and I don't want to speak on their behalf. The previous contractor did not charge lane hire fees, as far as I'm aware, to the regular users of swim and water polo associations, but we did have lane hire commercial rates applicable, and they were used at times.
Councillor Vanderman, comfortable with that?
No, I'm not. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm not going to... I'd like to speak for the motion, if it's possible, but I'll wait my turn.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey, speaking for.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I speak in support of the motion because I think it gives us an opportunity here to hear from the community, and I encourage all pool users to become involved and have a genuine and consultative discussion so we can get to some final conclusion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Speaker for, Councillor Vanderman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to sort of speak in favour of this motion because, contrary to Councillor Cameron's view, who doesn't like the motion on the basis his preference is at the moment for Model 1, this doesn't lock us into any preferred model until those consultations have been had. So obviously a report will come before us at some stage after that consultation has been completed, again with the 4 preferred models being presented to us as options. So I'm comfortable with the motion at the moment. I do share concerns that Councillor Cameron has had over this whole process, and I think whilst this is not a way forward, like not my preferred way forward, noting again the comments that Councillor Conn made about sporting groups paying their way as far as other sporting groups do. The issue for me is obviously around the difference, I suppose, in the asset costs to a certain extent for each of the user groups that use council facilities, whether it be the sports stadium or sports ground or a swimming pool. And I think that those issues have to be taken into consideration. I'm happy to support the motion as it stands and look forward to further discussions and details around what these models look like once this consultation process has been completed.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, the most appropriate member of staff. Following on from Councillor Vanderven's comments, can I confirm that would indeed be the process, that if this motion is successful, that there will be a further report prepared for Council and a further determination of Council's preferred strategy and position? Or will it simply be given to Aligned Leisure and Aligned Leisure told, go off and meet with the user groups and determine what you're going to do? Can I be reassured that what Councillor Vanderven has said will come to pass?
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Mr Zachnich.
Thanks for the question. While it's not explicitly clear in the motion, that's what will occur. Aligned Leisure will be asked to undertake the community engagement and ideally come up with the preferred model. If it's not the preferred model that's been recommended to Council, then that'll be reported back to us either way.
Councillor Cameron, you comfortable with that?
Not happy with it, but I'm happy I got an answer. Thank you.
Did you wish to propose an amendment to this particular motion
No.
at this point? No? You comfortable with that? Councillor Con.
I would be willing to amend the motion to add a part C that a further report be presented to council following consultation. That seems straightforward.
Stand by, Councillor Cameron.
As I articulated earlier, I'd be happy to support this motion if it was slightly modified by the mover and seconder, that the section that says, as per aligned leisure's community engagement strategy, and rather it said that council engage in community engagement over this issue. Words to that effect I would happily support.
Councillor Con.
As the mover, there's two different requests for amendments there, and I'll address them separately. I'm happy to accept the amendment that a further report be provided. The motion was written with the assumption that that would be the case. The reason that it was worded aligned leisure and not council is because aligned leisure have all the data about their members, and I believe their community engagement strategy involved them contacting all of the people who were members of their facilities over the past summer, and that council doesn't have access to that data, and that the strategy would therefore be different. So I drafted that motion having read the plan for aligned leisure's community engagement strategy. I don't want to amend that not knowing what our engagement strategy would be, not knowing what the alternative would be.
Councillor Thurley, the seconder.
I'm happy to accept the item C because, as Councillor Connor said, a further report to come to council. Make it quite explicit in the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Con, what's point C? We could have that included in the motion. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So point C, that a further report be provided to council following the conclusion of this consultation.
Thank you. We'll just wait for that to be included. That does that achieve the objective, Councillor Con?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so any other speakers for or against this particular motion? Councillor Con, did you wish to close debate on the motion? Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm disappointed to hear arguments tonight that were made against a motion that's essentially just asking for further consultation and isn't making a decision tonight. I don't think any of us are denying that there have been problems in getting to this point, but in my job as a medical doctor, I don't judge people for how they got into that mess, and I don't want to point fingers or play a blame game. There's only one decision that we need to make, and that's what we're going to do next from the point that we're at now. We need to either find a usage model that's acceptable to the majority of the community, and that might be Model 4, and we won't know that until we do this consultation, which is what I'm proposing. Or if we go with option 1, we will be asking the rest of the ratepayers of Albury to further subsidise swim clubs to quite a significant extent. Either way, we can't make that decision without going forward to the community and having an appropriate consultation process. And I thank other councillors for their support with this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Con. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those for the motion? Anyone against the motion? The motion is carried. Thank you.
Ask that my vote be recorded, Mr. Mayor.
So done. 13.3, acquisition of land for construction of the roundabout at Kerr Road, Thurgoona. Before we start this item, does anyone wish to leave whilst we have a... I think they're all leaving, Councillor Doxey. Now, hang on, councillors can't leave. He knows it was going to happen. I know. Oh. Thank you, councillors. We've cleared the decks. Now we'll move back to the items on the agenda. 13.3, the acquisition of land for construction of roundabout at Kerr Road, Figuna Drive. Thank you, Councillor Vanderman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendation that Council A approves any documentation required to widen the road reserve over the land known as Lot 228 in DP 1247400. B, approves payment of 81,000. Is that plus or minus GST? I'm not sure. In compensation for the road reserve widening. And C, approves payment of the owner's reasonable legal and mortgagee costs to enable this road reserve widening.
Thank you, Councillor Blacken. Just stand by. Yep.
Second that with or without the notation of including, or sorry, with the notation of including or excluding GST.
I think the report did reflect a GST component. Is that Mr Keys's question? Mr Ferris. How are we going with that one, Mr Ferris?
You, Mr Mayor, I'll need to take that on notice. I'm not aware if it incurs GST or it doesn't for compensation for valuation of the land.
Yeah, I thought I saw it in the values report, but if we take that on notice, that'd be great. Thank you. Did we have a seconder for that? We did. Yep. Councillor Vanderman, did you wish to open debate?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Construction of the water pump station 24. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council accept the tender from Southern Cross Developers Proprietary Limited for contract number 17/01814- construction of water pump station 24 for the lump sum amount of $273,880.16, including GST.
Thank you. Councillor Clacken.
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you.
There being no further speakers for or against, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Development application 10.2018.36561.1, 564 David Street, Albury. Thank you, Councillor Vanderman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll move recommendation to motion that Council A receive and note the contents of this report. B, agree to enter into voluntary planning agreement for the payment of monetary contributions in lieu of 3 car parking spaces as outlined in the draft voluntary planning agreement between Albury City Council and 566 David Street Proprietary Limited. C, hereby authorise the seal to be affixed to the voluntary planning agreement as part of the determination of the development application 10.2018.36.561.1 in the presence of 2 signatories authorised to affix the seal pursuant to Regulation 400 of the Local Government General Regulation 2005 and the Council seal and management of legal documents and advice procedure. And D, grant development consent to development application 10.2018.36.561.1 for alterations and additions to a commercial building and associated voluntary planning agreement at 564 David Street, Albury, subject to conditions contained in the draft determination included in the report as attachment 4. Now, should that be 566 David Street or 564? I don't know. It is 64? Okay.
564.
Righto.
Yep, we'll come up with that. Okay. Seconder, Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, do you wish to speak to that?
The only item that I was going to ask about was how much was the monetary consideration for a car parking space, and I found it on the very last page of the documentation. So thank you for forcing me to read the whole lot.
Excellent. There being no further speakers for or against, happy to put the motion as a what's the name? Division. Thank you. All those in favour? Councillor Stutchbury, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Cameron, Councillor Mack, Councillor Con, Councillor Glacken, Councillor Thurley and Councillor Vanderman. The motion is carried. Thank you. We have 13.6, which is also a development application 10.2018.36363.1, 600 Keene Street. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council A receive and note the contents of the report, and B, grant development consent to development application 10.2018.36363.1, proposing the extension to the outpatient and carers accommodation Albury Base Hospital extension to on-site car parking, removal of 5 trees, earthworks and retaining walls at 600 Keene Street, East Albury, subject to the conditions contained in the draft determination included in this report at attachment 7.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken?
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Councillor Thurlow, I just have a question. Did you wish to open debate first?
Oh, you can take the question, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Vanderman, question.
I do have 2 questions, Mr Mayor. One is, why was there an amended development lodged? Was it as a result of the submission from one local resident, or was it done because of some other reason? And the second question is, I thought that the section 64 and 94 contributions were light in consideration of the scope of the redevelopment, if you like, or the extensions. Could somebody explain why those figures seem to have been what I thought was light? It would have been more appropriate for one house lot rather than 10 extra units and en-suites and car parking, etc.
Mr Keys.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the questions. In regards to the first question, the design was amended due to construction requirements, primarily resulting from proximity to bushfire zone. So it was as a result of construction requirements, not because of objections received, and it was about tied in with the timing of the project. If they had continued down the original path, it would have taken longer to go through the process of approvals and necessary requirements. The applicants elected to put this amendment in of their own accord. In regards to the second one, I would take a little bit of that on notice, but I believe it's related to the type of units that are provided and the anticipated use, and therefore the loadings that are going to come from. Laundry facilities and the like are not provided in the rooms. It is a basic shared toilets and type of arrangements in some quarters, and that's the reduced demand as a result of that.
Councillor Thurlow, you should open debate, or did you have another question?
Just a follow-up. Is it possible to get some explanation around those developer contributions at a later stage? I understand it's probably too late, but I just want to understand why they were what they were.
Mr Keys?
Mr Mayor, I can certainly provide that.
Thank you. Comfortable with that, Councillor Vanderman?
Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Thurlow, you should open debate on the item.
No, I think basically this is once again adding to the facility and providing care support for people who have to use the facilities of the hospital, and we should welcome and be glad of this sort of development. It's terrific that people who are already under stress don't have to suffer more stress of trying to find a place and having to drive to and fro. They're there on site supporting the person who's being cared for and looking after themselves. So I totally support this.
Thank you, Councillor Thurlow. Councillor Glacken, you speak for.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'll be very brief. Thank you very much for the opportunity. This facility is very important, and Councillor Thurley's right. In a stressful situation, you don't need more stress. I'm very aware that a number of people who need to come to use our medical facilities choose to come to our medical facilities here in Albury because when they get here, it is less stressful than going down to Melbourne, and they will travel further to come to us than they will to travel to Melbourne and be caught in a very much more stressful situation. They find these facilities to be very convenient, but also a much more relaxing opportunity for them as an individual or as a family when they're using our medical facilities. So I support this wholeheartedly. The other thing to remember is that our community also supports this significantly, and that support can be shown by the donations generated by our people within our community, our local government area, who don't really use that facility. The people who use this facility are people from outside, other local government shires and areas, and the amount raised by organisations from within our own community was amazing. I have heard that this facility, the original 20-room facility at Hilltop, raised that amount in half the time, less than half the time than they had originally anticipated it would take to raise. So the further development of this, the further 10 rooms are very important to continue the good work of this organisation for the community that we serve in the larger region. So thank you very much to Councillor Thurley for showing his support and highlighting the very positive opportunities that this facility gives to people who use it in what is otherwise a very difficult time for them. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor Con, speaking for.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I won't repeat other councillors in talking about how fantastic and how important this facility is. What I wanted to do is acknowledge the hard work of the Zonta Club in bringing it about, because not many people have heard of the Zonta Club. And I was speaking at their International Women's Day dinner last week, and they acknowledged the hard work of their members who originally proposed this facility. They did absolutely outstanding work partnering with Rotary and with Lions and with the Fight Cancer Foundation to make it happen. The Zonta Club is a service group whose explicit aim is to empower women through service and advocacy, and I don't think they get nearly enough credit for the work that they do. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Con. There are no other speakers for or against. I just have a question first and foremost. Mr Keys probably would be the appropriate person to answer the question. It says in the report that the for the purpose of calculating Section 64 contributions, Council defined the guest rooms as backpacker hostel as per Water Directorate guidelines in an attempt to decrease the cost. Is that correct?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I just have to clarify it. In an attempt to decrease the costs?
Well, it says for the purpose of calculating Section 64 contribution, Council defined the guest rooms as backpacker hostel as per Water Directorate guidelines.
Yep.
And then it says in the final paragraph that there is no credit that can be applied to the proposal as the application places additional demand on the site by additional 10 guest bedrooms. So does it mean it's been classified differently to apply a discount, or is it just the process which we would normally define?
The definition that's been applied is what's appropriate to the use.
Yeah, okay. So just another question. In relation to the construction of the cancer facility, the hospital itself, from memory, did we apply or provide an exemption for development contributions? Can you recall?
Through Mr Mayor, in a protracted agreement that was finally reached between the state government in regards to those contributions and council's necessary works that were required as a result of the upgrades and the demands on our existing systems, we came to a mutually agreeable point, which didn't involve the direct payment of any contributions, although recognition of existing augmentation of the existing sewer network was required.
Okay, so further question is, in relation to the Hilltop Carer Centre, have we provided them at any point during the stage one construction and this construction any deferral of the contributions, exemptions?
As the report states, through you, Mr Mayor, as the report states, under Section 94, a charitable group is exempt from any Section 94 contributions, so there is an exemption there, quite clearly. But in regards to Section 64, that demand has been derived from the Water Directorate guidelines as a proposed use as a backpackers hostel, given the way the proposal use occurs, which is similar, the closest definition we could come up with to in terms of that use is similar to a backpackers hostel.
Okay, no worries. Mr Zachnich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, but if I recall stage one, Council made a donation to the equivalent value to the development application at that time in terms of its support. So it has had previous support for this type of development.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Thurley, no more speakers for or against or questions. Do you wish to close debate?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I have put the motion in the division. All those in favour, Councillor Stutchbury, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Cameron, Councillor Mate, Councillor Con, Councillor Glacken, Councillor Thurley and Councillor Vanderman. The motion is carried. Okay, let's move on to the next report, which is Officer Reports for noting the 14.1 City Powers Partnership Update. Councillor Con.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I move that Council note the report on progress on pledges under the City's Power Partnership.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Happy to second the motion.
Councillor Con, did you wish to speak to that?
Only briefly, Mr Mayor. Our membership in this project has obviously resulted in a number of positive projects for Council, and I was really pleased to receive the update on where we're at. I think it's particularly topical coming into a federal election where we're hearing all sorts of nonsense about renewable energy and the cost of it, that Council's actually saved $143,000 through our Energy Savings Action Plan, and hope we can continue that.
Thank you, Councillor Con. I have a speaker for Councillor Thurley.
She stole my thunder, but I'll say it again. It particularly pleasing to note 8 PV systems of 250 kilowatts installed, 732 megawatts of savings, and Councillor Con is correct, $143,000. And the best part of it, of course, is that it was used, 99% of it was used in situ, not exported to the grid.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. And just to value add, I was at the Lauren Jackson meeting the other night, and it was spoken about quite highly in terms of the initial, I recall being in this chamber when the initial motion was put forward by Councillor Vanderman that we put photovoltaics on Lauren Jackson, and with the LED lighting it's provided significant savings. So it's to be commended. Councillor Condé, do you wish to close debate?
Thank you.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 14.2, the Albury City Communications Strategy. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council receive and note the Albury City Communications Strategy 2019-2021 and the Albury City Community Engagement Plan 2019-2023.
Thank you. Councillor Gleichen.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, to open that debate.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 14.3, the Customer Experience Strategy. Councillor Gleichen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. To move the recommendation as a motion that Council receive and note the Customer Experience Strategy 2019 to 2022.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion.
Councillor Gleichen, do you wish to speak to that?
No, that's fine, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. No further speakers for or against. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 14.4, Live Well, Work Well, Zero Harm Framework. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just waiting. That Council receive and note the Live Well, Work Well, Zero Harm Framework.
Thank you. Councillor Gleichen.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, to open debate on that item.
Just briefly, I think it's a terrific initiative and everyone will know that I've been perhaps a critic at times of some of the things that have happened here. But this is a good strategy. It's an all-round strategy. It's mental health, physical health and well-being. And it's great that a council encourages this sort of support amongst its staff and really encourages not just work safety, but all these other things. On the work safety thing, we've come a long way. I looked at the numbers, 2005-6 to 2012-13, our LTIFR dropped from 24 to 5. That's our lost term injury frequency rate, from 24 to 5. That was a huge, huge accomplishment. What a little concerning, from 2012 to 2017, we've stalled a bit. We're still around the 5 to 10 mark, and that's the challenge, I think. Getting the first heap off is usually the easy part. Once you get down to the lower numbers, that's when it gets hard, and I expect this will be a big challenge for our staff now and in the future, but one that I don't think they're shying away from, one that this policy really tries to push front and centre. And I thank the staff for a great report and wish them well in implementing this program.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. There will be no further questions or speakers for or against. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. There are no delegates' reports for noting. Notice of urgent business. Councillor Thurley, you have an item?
I just had one matter that I'd like to raise because I think it deserves some public recognition. A couple of weeks ago, I went to a function held at the Hive, and it was to announce that the Albury project, to be conducted by Yes, and heavily involvement from our staff, had received funding. And for those who are not aware, the Albury project is a direct copy of something called the Geelong project. And they recognise that early school leavers are at significant risk of homelessness later in life. So rather than wait till that happens, they have attacked the problem in high schools. And my understanding is that in a few short years, Geelong has reduced the rate of homelessness by 30%. This program will be rolled out here in Albury starting in the second school term. All participating high schools will be, the students from each year of those schools will be surveyed with a number of questions that are intended to elucidate their risk of early school leaving. And then actions will be taken to try and keep them back in school, because the downstream effect is they will likely go on to become homeless, and then the cascading effects of that, drug use, violence and other things. So I commend Yes and our staff members who've been involved in this fabulous initiative. It's worked brilliantly for Geelong, and we had Professor McKenzie here to speak again about the project, and I'm really pleased that it's been funded and we're going to get on with it here in this city.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I have items from Councillor Glacken.
If I could just ask a question,
Yep.
Mr Mayor, with regards to that program, the Albury program.
Yep.
What age groups, so does it start at year 7 or is it just years 9 and 10? What age group does that look at, the surveys?
Councillor Thurley.
I'll go to Ms Code, please.
Ms Code.
Thank you for the question through you, Mr Mayor. The Albury project will start from year 7 to year 12, so all of the year levels will be screened, and hopefully in the future we could go to grade 5 and grade 6, because there is a loss between grade 6 and year 7, and those kids just disappear. So, but first we've got to get the high school side right.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Question from Councillor Vanderman. Is it a question?
Well, the question is a notice of some urgent business.
Okay,
Mr
I'll
Mayor.
just finish up with this one if you like.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Councillor Thurley, you done?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Vanderman, your turn.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just want to signal that I'd like to have an update on our actions regarding the demise of DPAN Proprietary Limited with other subcontractors that are caught in that demise.
Thank you, Mr Ferris.
Through you, Mr Mayor, we're currently proceeding with the progress that I outlined in the last workshop around. We gave notice around taking back the works. We've progressed along there. Obviously, moving into liquidation on the 1st of March meant any direct payments to subcontractors cannot be made. Therefore, our focus is on completing the works that are outstanding, which we hold retention and security funds for.
Yeah, thank you for that brief update, but I'd like councillors to be kept informed because there are some significant debts owed to contractors for work that's already been performed but doesn't fall into the category of stuff that wasn't completed. So I'm concerned for those subcontractors.
Thank you. Mr Zaknich, can we just be kept in the loop on that one, please?
Yes, absolutely. We'll provide another update at the workshop on Monday night as we're getting advice and as the situation unfolds.
Thank you. Okay, we're up to the confidential business, CM 17.1. Councillor Vanderman.
I move that we go into confidential to discuss a confidential item exclusive for press or public and grounds the matter relates to the matters of information of the following. A, personnel matters concerning particular individuals other than councillors, Local Government Act 1993, number 30, section 10A 2A.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion.
Prior to putting the motion, I would ask if there are any statements, submissions from the public regarding the reasons identified for this confidential item. And there appears to be no public left, so I'm assuming that there's no issues. No submissions received, and happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. We'll just... Thank you. We've moved back into open council, and I'm required to read the endorsement or the motion that was carried by council. It was moved by councillor. Have we got the motion? Thank you, Councillor Vanderman, and seconded by Councillor Doxey. The council endorsed the results of the General Manager's 2018-19 6-month performance review, and that motion was carried. I now call a conclusion to tonight's meeting. Thank you.